And if we took our intelligence, and if we were more contemplative in terms of the way we sought to understand issues, rather than using solely a left hemisphere linear, supposedly logical approach to understanding things, then we would see that the obvious thing to do is to apply our intelligence in ways that create systems, ways of life that naturally create health and naturally create sustainability. And then if we were doing that, I suspect we'd also be creating a way of life and systems that naturally created joy and beauty and all sorts of other things, and wisdom. Our society we're swimming in oceans of information, but pulling wisdom out of those seas of information is a very challenging thing. So, if we take something like the IT sector, and where I suspect would be a useful way for it to evolve, would be to start to develop wisdom technology. Where's the wisdom technology? Well, the only areas I see wisdom technology is human beings who are sitting back and contemplating and meditating and using their consciousness in different ways. And the information systems that dominate our culture don't give us wisdom, and our political systems certainly don't give us wisdom. So I think once we start looking for different objectives, then we can create a different kind of future. And so one of the issues that for me is our visions of the future. What are the typical visions for our future that our culture gives us? Well, we have Arnold Schwarzenegger movies and Blade Runner and
Well, it's interesting also you mentioned Schwarzenegger. Of course, he's the governor of California, and they're in the news now because they're in huge debt, billions and billions of dollars. So it's obviously what he's doing there is completely unsustainable again.
Yes. Well, we're building up financial debt, but we're also building up ecological debt, because I was born in 1962, which was the year that Rachel Carson's book Silent Spring was published, which said the inevitable result, one of the most important books in the environmental movement, and it said that the inevitable result of pumping toxic agrochemicals into ecosystems is toxicity. It's not a sustainable thing to do, it's certainly not a wise thing to do, and it can have only one result. And so we're building up debt in that sense. The longer we continue to pump poisons into global ecosystems of which we are a part, the longer we will have to work to overcome that debt. And that, again, there's a pattern there. We can see that in different areas.
Well, one thing I want to pick up on to know more about, you mentioned about the left hemisphere of the brain. Do you want to explain briefly how the left and the right hand side of the brain work? This is the neocortex, isn't it, the front of the brain?
Yes. So you asked how we've come to this situation. One of the things I've talked about is culture. So culture is a part. I think the structure of our brains, and therefore the consciousness that emanates and that we live in day to day, is part of the picture as well, and my thinking here has been influenced. Again, it started with Fritjof Capra, A Crisis of Perception, and he essentially, boiling it down, was saying that we're dominated by linear approaches rather than holistic approaches. So those that have looked at the different activities between left and right hemisphere, essentially the left hemisphere is a linear processor.
So what does that mean in practical terms?
So in practical terms, that means it will look at things one thing at a time. So we take sustainability or consciousness, and those are big, what I'd call big picture issues. So in my book I've used a diagram, created a diagram, so a big picture frame with a planet and a brain to represent the consciousness system, not just about the brain, I should point out. If we break those down into language, which is a linear thing, I can't say lots of words at the same time, and you can't hear lots of words talking about conversations, talking about different things at the same time in your normal state of consciousness. So we break the big picture down into a long line of words, one after the other. The long line of words is not the same as a big picture. So sustainability, whilst we might get to a point of really understanding it, that is something then we have to struggle to communicate, because it's about interrelatedness, multidimensionality, complexity, diversity.
It's thinking outside the box, isn't it? And for what you're saying, the left-hand side of the brain thinks within the box somehow.
Yes, and one of the things I know you're interested in with consciousness TVs is duality and connectedness, and thinking. We're in a situation where we think that ways of connecting with the wholeness of things is thinking outside of the box. We're not part of we're not separate from nature, from the Earth's ecosystems, from consciousness in a broader sense. Yet we tend to think of ourselves as separate, and so trying to connect with the wholeness of things would be seen as thinking outside of the box.
Okay, and what's the qualities of the right-hand side of the brain?
So the right hemisphere is about artistic, creative, holistic, big picture things, and one of the people that influenced my thinking was Arthur Koestler, who wrote a book called The Act of Creation, which at that point was the biggest study of creativity of human beings, looking at art, looking at humour, science. That and other books I've looked at, they all emphasise that the greatest scientific insights, and they give numerous examples, mathematical insights, the people having these great insights actually had transcendental experiences or artistic experiences. There's the example of the guy who came up with lasers, Gould, who he had this momentary insight where he saw in a sort of visual way this new thing. Lasers are not natural. They're a really good example because they are so different, and it took him days, weeks, months to translate that into a linear, language-based way of describing it. So in a moment, we can get these powerful insights, and an awful lot of us experience these things in our life, and they can be very transformative. And then we struggle to work out what it means in practice. And my perspective on this is linked to the work of a friend of mine, Tony Wright, as well, who his perspective is that we're in our normal state of consciousness, we're dominated by the left hemisphere, and actually that's struggling to stay in control. And I suspect he could be right. I'm just interested in this on practical terms. I know this for myself, that when I'm really busy, and I'm presumably mainly in my left-hand side of my brain, I'm answering emails or on the phone or whatever, then I'm efficient. Well, most of the time I'm efficient, but I'm not that creative. Yeah.
And then I may be, been working a few hours and I go for a walk in the woods, which I love doing, and then suddenly an idea will hit me.
Exactly.
It's like the space is cleared, isn't it?
Yes.
The left-hand side's calmed down a bit.
Yeah.
The right-hand side, that was presumably always there,
Yes.
pops through,
Yes.
and I get back to my office. And then, of course, the challenge is then, I've got the great idea, can I maybe put it into practice? And I guess I'm engaging the left-hand side again. Is that how you would see it?